Every gardener has heard the same warnings about composting. People say you need to turn the pile every day, that citrus peels will ruin it, or that compost takes years before it's usable. These myths keep beginners from starting, and even experienced gardeners waste energy following rules that don't actually matter. The truth is simpler, more practical, and much easier than most think. Today we're going to bust the 5 biggest composting myths that refuse to die and replace them with clear, proven practices you can apply right in your garden. By the end of this guide, you'll see why composting is not only one of the most powerful tools for soil health, but also one of the most forgiving. The first myth is that compost piles must be turned constantly. One of the most common pieces of advice is that you need to flip and turn your compost pile every few days, or it will never break down. While turning does speed up aeration and can help speed the process, it's not mandatory. Decomposition happens regardless of whether you disturb the pile or not. Microbes, fungi, and earthworms don't stop working just because you leave the heap alone. In fact, many gardeners create lazy piles or cold composting systems where organic matter is simply stacked and left untouched. The difference is timing. A turned pile may finish in 2 or 3 months if managed well, while an untouched pile might take 6 months to a year. But in both cases you end up with dark, crumbly compost that feeds your soil. For a practical example, if you create a pile 4 feet wide and 4 feet tall with alternating layers of green materials like grass clippings and brown materials like dried leaves, you can choose whether to turn it weekly for faster results or leave it alone for a slower process. Either way, you win. The second myth is that meat, dairy, and citrus can never go in compost. This myth comes from a real concern but is often overstated. It's true that meat, dairy, and oily foods can attract rodents and smell unpleasant in an open backyard pile. However, they absolutely will decompose just like plant material. The issue isn't the composting process, it's the pests they may bring. With a well-managed hot pile or a closed system like a tumbler, even these ingredients can be broken down safely. Citrus peels are another misunderstood ingredient. Some gardeners believe they kill worms or stall decomposition. The truth is that citrus is acidic, but when mixed into a large pile, that acidity is diluted. Worms in vermicomposting bins may avoid fresh citrus for a while, but once it begins breaking down, they consume it with no problem. For example, a handful of orange peels tossed into a 3-foot pile of mixed materials is insignificant compared to the overall balance of the heap. The key is proportion. Keep strong-smelling items buried deep in the pile and avoid adding huge amounts at once, and everything will compost just fine. The third myth is that composting smells terrible. Many people avoid starting a pile because they assume it will stink up the whole garden. In reality, a properly balanced compost pile smells earthy, not foul. Bad odors only occur when the balance of greens and browns is off, or when materials become compacted and anaerobic. Too much nitrogen-rich waste like food scraps or fresh grass clippings creates a sour, ammonia-like smell. The fix is simple. Just add more carbon-rich material such as dried leaves, straw, or shredded cardboard to absorb moisture and restore balance. A good rule is the 2-to-1 ratio. For every bucket of kitchen scraps you add, cover it with at least 2 buckets of browns. If your pile starts smelling, go ahead and sprinkle a thin layer of finished compost or garden soil over the top. This introduces more microbes and seals odors. Even a large backyard pile, if built correctly, should only smell like damp earth after a rain. If it reeks, that's not composting, that's rot, and balance is the solution. So, the fourth myth is that compost takes years to finish. This misconception actually discourages a lot of beginners. But the truth is, compost can be finished in as little as 8 to 12 weeks if you have the right conditions. The factors that really matter are the carbon to nitrogen ratio, moisture particle size, and aeration. If you chop or shred materials into smaller pieces, that'll speed up decomposition. You should keep the pile as moist as a wrung-out sponge and try to maintain a good balance between greens and browns. For instance, A pile built in spring with alternating layers of fresh grass clippings, shredded leaves, and a sprinkling of garden soil will heat up within days. If you turn that pile weekly, it can produce finished compost by midsummer. And honestly, even if you never turn it, the same pile will still yield usable compost by autumn or the following spring. So the idea that it always takes years comes from neglected piles in poor conditions, not from the natural process itself. Composting can actually be quick if you just give the microbes what they need. The fifth myth is that you need special activators to make compost work. You know, garden stores often sell compost activators or claim that you need manure, yeast, or purchased inoculants to get decomposition started. While those things can help, honestly, they're not necessary. Composting is powered by microbes already present in your yard, on food scraps, and in the soil. As soon as you pile organic matter together, decomposition begins automatically. Adding a shovelful of garden soil or a scoop of finished compost introduces plenty of microorganisms to get things moving. Grass clippings, coffee grounds, or kitchen scraps are natural nitrogen sources that fire up microbial activity. You don't need to buy a thing. For example, build a 3-foot pile with layers of shredded newspaper kitchen scraps and garden trimmings, then add a little soil between layers. Within a week, the center of the pile will heat up without any commercial booster. The idea that compost won't work without additives is simply marketing, not science. When these myths are stripped away, composting becomes, well, pretty straightforward. You don't need to follow rigid rules or worry about every single ingredient. The essentials are balance, moisture, and time. Green materials like food scraps and grass provide nitrogen. Brown materials like dried leaves, straw, and cardboard provide carbon. A rough ratio of 1 part greens to 2 parts browns. That's what keeps the microbes happy. Just add water when the pile feels dry, cover it when it's too wet, and let the organisms do the work. Every gardener can adapt the process to their own lifestyle. If you enjoy tinkering, turn the pile regularly, and you'll finish compost pretty quickly. If you prefer low effort, just pile up your waste and let it decompose slowly. Both approaches are valid, and both result in rich, dark compost that really transforms your soil. The myths about composting, like constant turning, banned ingredients, bad smells, endless waiting, and costly activators, are barriers that discourage gardeners. But once these myths are busted, composting is revealed for what it truly is, a forgiving, flexible, and powerful way to recycle organic matter into living soil. The pile doesn't demand perfection. It rewards consistency, patience, and just a little common sense. A garden fed with compost grows differently. Plants root deeper, hold moisture longer, and resist pests more effectively. The soil becomes darker, looser, and more alive each season, and it all begins with scraps that many households throw away. If you've been hesitating because of the old warnings, just set them aside. Go ahead and start a pile today. Add your scraps, balance with browns, and let the microbes handle the rest. Composting isn't a chore, it's really nature's own recycling system, just waiting for you to put it to work. For more in-depth guides on building soil, reviving beds, and honestly growing smarter instead of harder, make sure you subscribe to Hydro Haven and share this video with fellow gardeners. Together, we can build soil that lasts for generations and gardens that thrive with less effort.